Be hanging out in the hood.
Hi, welcome to Almost Cooperstown.
I'm Mark.
And this is Gordon, and we love talking about baseball.
The 2021 season is underway, and teams have played games, not our Mets as of yet because of COVID protocols. But what's already happened this season, probably for the last season it will be happening, and that is pitchers are still hitting in the National League.
Yeah, and it is kind of weird because there's a lot of signs that point to this sort of being the last year that pitchers are going to hit. With the CBA coming up, it seems like an inevitability that they're going to do away with pitchers hitting.
Yeah, it would have happened this season, I think, and they couldn't get together on a deal to expand the playoffs, but the owners wanted to expand the playoffs beyond the 10 teams that are going in this year as opposed to last year when we had more. And so the players like, well, fine, we want the designated hitter. And that's another job for players to be on the roster. So for them, it's a players, union, issue.
And I think it's interesting because from purely a fan perspective, it's both a positive and a negative. It's a positive because, frankly, you're losing out on 3 to 4 at-bats a game that are functionally meaningless. Because, functionally meaningless from the perspective of a fan enjoyment, because it's like nothing's going to happen.
And it's been getting worse.
And it's getting worse.
Right.
And so, but the removal of the pitcher in essentially having a black hole somewhere in your lineup removes some of the strategic element of the game. There is a noticeable
Absolutely.
difference if you look at the American League and how much teams bunt.
Yes, absolutely. And if you go back, the DH is not quite 50 years old, which is hard to believe. It started in 1973. Ron Blomberg batted for the Yankees in 1973, April 6th, and walked with the bases loaded. It was the first appearance by a designated hitter. People would joke sometimes, why, if it's spelled Blomberg, why wasn't it Rune Blomberg instead of Ron Blomberg? Like, what's up with that? It looks like Blomberg, but it's pronounced Bloomberg. Anyway, he's kind of famous, right? Because people know his name. He was the first. And it's hard to believe it was that long ago. And the National Leaguers for years, and I am one of those card-carrying National League fans, I like the strategy of the pitcher hitting. I want to see double switches.
Oh, there's a relative common phrase that gets parried around online that's the equivalent of F the DH, because a lot of especially National League fans see it that way. They see it as essentially a perversion of the game, so to speak, because you're putting in this guy that has no objective other than to be a good hitter.
But I'll admit it. You know what it is when you have pitchers hit? That's old guy baseball.
It's also just boring. I'm sorry. I don't want to go up and watch. Because, for every interesting pitcher who can kind of hit, we remember Madison Bumgarner as being a great hitting pitcher. And he's a career 177 hitter.
Yeah. 177. I think his ops was 221.
And we think of him as this
his on base percentage was 221.
Impressive hitting
ops was
pitcher.
43.
I guess he's impressive just because relative to the rest of the other pitchers, he's just a really, really bad position player offensively, where the rest of them are actual pitchers in it.
Right, they would put up Bumgarner to pinch hit, unlike our own Bartolo Colon, who the fanfare about Bartolo's home run a few years ago, he had a 357-foot home run in San Diego off James Shields, and took 30 and a half seconds to round the bases. I think he might still be out there, actually.
And that was baseball poetry.
Right. It was so fun and all that, but those are so few. It's so far between, and we're talking about something that happened 5 years ago.
And I think it's also I think baseball for National League fans specifically, they've developed this sort of collective amnesia about pitcher at bats where we were able to just block out 99.9% of them so we can focus on the rare ones, like Bartolo hitting a home run. So that's all we think about when pitchers hitting, not the, oh wow, it was really entertaining watching Taijuan Walker go 0 for 3 from the plate today.
Went back and looked at a player that some consider the worst hitting pitcher in history, a guy named Ron Herbel. I do not know this player. He played for the Giants. But, he last pitched in 71, and he hit an anemic .029 for his career, going 6 for 206 with 125 strikeouts. I mean, he got up 206 times. He got 6 hits.
I mean, that's just you got to imagine it was probably weird for him to be on base.
Now they like to point out that to his credit, he improved gradually as the years went on, contributing 5 hits over his final 98 bats. So he was really starting to get it at the end of his career.
He began his career with a ghastly 1 for 108.
Yeah, yes.
I don't even want to imagine what that hitting percentage is like.
And how about let's just pick on Herbal a little bit. I'm sure he's a great guy. A disastrous 0 for 47 with 30 strikeouts for the Giants in 1964.
Yeah, the 30 strikeouts are what's kind of unbelievable because that means that you couldn't. There wasn't even like 20 situations for you to have bunted in.
The joke with his abysmal technique, they said he may have well stepped to the plate with chopsticks and oven mitts. It wouldn't have made much of a difference. Oof. Yeah. So also took a look back at the performances of the top pitchers of the hitting wise, and there's been no change since 2005. And what I mean by that is you have names on the highest seasonal average for a pitcher, like Oral Hershiser. He has the highest average in the DH era, 356. He had 26 for 73 in 1993. That would really impress me, actually. And names if you're a fan of baseball that were good hitting pitchers.
I remember Mike Hampton was a good hitting pitcher.
Yes, he would pinch hit like Bumgarner.
Regular, but he was actually. But like, if you look at this, like I'm looking at this right here, and I see Mike Hampton has multiple seasons in this top, he had multiple seasons where he had over 300 as a batter.
George Brett's brother, Ken Brett, lesser known to most fans, but I remember him, was another guy who was probably a better hitting player than he was a pitcher, though he was primarily a pitcher.
Yeah.
I didn't know that Fernando Valenzuela batted 304 in 1990. Who thought Fernando could hit?
I remember Carlos Zambrano had that one year where he hit really well. But you're looking at these guys where it's just like he went 29 of 90. When you actually like look at what they did in the context of the full season, it's like, okay, yeah, this one guy was kind of good, but then you also had all the other pitchers on the staff that were just terrible.
So you mentioned Owings, and he was the last guy to end up with a 339 average in 2007. Since that time, nobody has made it to the top 20, meaning nobody's hit 300 as a pitcher in the major leagues.
And yeah, in 13 seasons.
Yeah, so it's
getting worse.
It's getting worse. I took a look back over the past 5 seasons, and if you compare the DH at bats to pitcher at bats, there's obviously more DH at bats. The DH is batted 61,000 times, had a collective average of 251, slugged 440, struck out 23% of the time, and had 25 plate appearances per home run. Okay.
Yeah.
How about the pitchers? Well, they batted almost 30,000 times, so about half, a little less. Collective average of 126, slugged 161, struck out 39% of the time. Okay, almost 4.
That's actually lower than I would have expected.
Actually, you're right. Maybe because they were bunting, and that saved some of the strikeouts. And then they had 237 plate appearances per home run.
So I think what's interesting is that, I mean, right there, it's a more entertaining game if DHs are hitting than if pitchers are hitting. But I think the comment and the idea that there would be strategical elements of the game that were lost because of that, I almost wonder if you're just like, well, wait a second, you're pining for a strategy for an inferior way of playing. If the only time bunting and doing all of that is a logical move was when you have a guy that's essentially a net negative in your lineup, then it's actually probably not that good of a move.
Right. And to just, being good at bunting if you're a pitcher, I think Tom Glavine is sometimes thought of as one of the better hitting pitchers, and really what he was good at was bunting.
Right, and it stands to reason that, honestly, all of the good batters should be able to bunt. The question that you're asking yourself is, the only reason why pitchers making sense to bunt is because they're more likely to just make a net negative out. Whereas with batters up, you're like, okay, wait a second, there's actually cost benefit analysis you have to do on giving up an out essentially with a sacrifice.
Correct. And you have some of the best pitchers in the game were also some of the best hitting pitchers in the game. Venerated names like Warren Spahn and Don Drysdale. Bob Gibson was a very good hitter. We know today Zach Greinke, who isn't hitting because he's pitching the American League, terrific hitter when he was hitting. The old Walter Johnson was actually a 300 career hitter back for the Senators back in the 20s when he was in his heyday. Michael Lorenzen of the Reds is a good hitter. It's good because he's not a great pitcher. He could be, but after this season, it's going to be more about his pitching because they're not going to hit anymore.
It's just something that it feels antiquated at this point. Like we're just doing it because it's what we've always done.
Right. I think it's just tradition, right? And what you don't realize is the slow eroding. And if you look, even when you pitched in high school and a little in college, right? They dissuaded you from hitting. And if you talk to any of the pitchers, Matt Moore, who's going to start for the Phillies, I think against DeGrom,
about high school.
He said they stopped me in high. You can't hit anymore, and you get no at bats.
Really, the only way you're going to keep hitting as a pitcher is if you're such a good player in high school that you pitch and then play a position when you're not pitching.
So you would be kind of explaining Shohei Ohtani.
Exactly. Like you have to be. Now, there are plenty of guys that do that in high school, especially for smaller schools all across the country. You're going to have a guy that's the best player on the team that pitches once a week and then goes and plays shortstop or something. And that kid probably hits, and he's going to get to hit because he's a regular part of the lineup. But as soon as you're at a school or a program big enough where there's the pitchers and then the position players, the pitchers aren't going to take at bats because you're not going to spend time on a guy that's going to get maybe 2 at bats a week.
But I think it's interesting because, even at the high school level, they will take the bat out of the pitcher's hands because they see in front of them they're not going to be hitting very much, even though there's a good chance that best pitcher on your team might be the best hitter on your team.
He's also one of the better hitters on your team.
Right. So I think that's at that level. It's
and you can also say that we saw that with our high school program because there were the 3 pitchers on there, but one of them was a lefty who also played first base, so he got to keep hitting. Even when the other 2 of us didn't get to keep hitting because we didn't play the field ever.
Yeah. Well, and they just, they would put you out there and not let hit you in the wrong particular time. If they put you up there, it was when you haven't, seen a pitch or taken a bat.
Exactly. So he's like, you can't expect the pitcher to do well at that point. It's the same thing in the majors. These guys take very little BP. They take very little practice. So of course they're not going to do well for them.
And they're going to get, a pitcher, a starting pitcher in the major leagues. If he lasts 6 innings, maybe he gets 3 at bats in a game.
Right. And so much of it can be like, if you're a starting pitcher and you have if you're Madison Bumgarner or Micah Owings and you have 1 game against a bad pitcher where you go 3 for 3, congratulations. Your chance of having a much higher average this year just skyrocketed.
Right.
Because you hit so infrequently, singular good performances buoy your average to a much higher degree.
Velocities are higher by significant amounts. It's hard to hit to begin with. It's getting harder for position players to hit, as we can see. So it makes perfect sense that they take this out of the game and make it something of the past.
And also, pitchers don't have the luxury. Pitchers now, they go all out on every single batter. You don't have guys kind of laying up on the pitcher anymore. They're just going to try and get the pitcher out in 3 pitches.
So we've covered, a big part of the game, which is going to change. But how about something that isn't talked about very much? Position players that go into pitch.
Yeah. It's weird because it's not something you would ever really think about as a meaningful part of the game because it only pretty much happens in non-meaningful games.
Well, that's such a good point because I went back and looked at, when's the last time somebody got a decision as a position player?
I think an even more interesting question, has there ever been a position player that has gotten a decision in a 9-inning game?
Oh, no.
Exactly.
I don't.
That's the only circumstance I could think of, some wacky, super long game where a position player is the pitcher of record at the end of it.
Oh, meaning that it was an extra inning game and he happened to pitch 9 innings? No examples.
No, I'm saying within the context of a standard 9-inning baseball game,
right.
Has a position player ever been the pitcher of record and gotten the decision?
Again, freaks like Ohtani would probably, Shohei would probably be as close as you get.
I don't even really quantify,
Right.
You don't quantify Ohtani as a pitcher.
Right.
Or as a position player who's pitching because he's both.
He's the rare animal.
He's the exception.
Right.
As far as I'm aware, he is the exception where he is the first guy I've ever really known of. That's in modern era baseball that it's good enough to play a position and pitch at the same time.
And I don't have a scientific look at this, but I did look back at recent seasons, and it looks like position players pitch in major league games about 10 times total in a season.
Across the entire
right.
majors?
Yeah.
Because it's always a big deal when it happens, and it's almost always in the context of absurdly extra long inning game, which, by the way, you're not getting anymore with a guy on second.
That's a good point.
You're not seeing that anymore. And blowouts. And so that's the thing. If it's in a blowout, the guy's never going to get a decision.
Right.
Over.
And of course, the position players are begging the managers to pitch. Todd Frazier, when he was, please let me go out and pitch. I want to pitch.
Yeah, because for them, there's no pressure on the moment. The only reason you're ever pitching it is a game where it's functionally meaningless, and you're probably behind because you're not going to throw a position player out there to pitch if you're up, because it's like the ultimate sign of disrespect.
So after the 2020 season, since 2008, here's the cumulative line allowed by position players pitching: 321 average, 399 on base, slugging 630.
Yeah, so it's just not a good strategic move. You're pretty much only doing that after you've thrown in the towel.
So, you've got guys like, that have had a supposed success at coming in and pitching. Russell Martin, because he had a good inning,
An inning.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it comes down to, is guys have good innings. There's so little statistical, support for any kind of a trend that you could think, wow, this guy, maybe we should pitch him some more. I remember when J.D. Davis came over to the Mets from Oakland, he had pitched a 1-2-3 inning throwing 92 miles an hour for the A's. Oh, he's a two-way player. He hasn't come near a pitching mound.
I don't think they've let him on a mound.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to just field the ball at third base, JD, and hit. That's all we need you to do. So, Tom Murphy, Jason Lane, Aaron Miles, Alex Avila, who's still playing. These are some of the best performances by pitchers over like an inning or two, which makes it statistically irrelevant as far as I'm concerned.
Exactly. It's such a small sample size. And if whenever you watch them, it's always impressive to me. You realize you ever want to see how hard it is to pitch in the major leagues? Watch the position players try to do it, because they look so awkward up there. Their motions are always just all over the place, and they're all arm. They have no drive with their legs or hips, and they're up there. They're like, they have a good arm, and they can throw it like 85.
But some of the guys can throw.
Some of the guys can get up to the low 90s.
Absolutely.
But you don't ever see those position players come in and gun it at like 95.
So
they just don't have that.
Position players since 2008 who pitch get a miss on 11% of swings. Regular pitchers get a miss on 22.7% of swings.
Double.
So yeah,
but that makes sense, because when you think about it, I wonder how many of the percentages of swings and miss generated by pitchers come on not fastballs.
I think the batter's laughing.
Oh, yeah.
You can't swing seriously.
Well, I'm just saying, you immediately, if you have a position player pitching, you've probably cut off about half the pitches, because the only thing I expect him to throw with any kind of decency to it would be a fastball.
Well, they throw knuckleballs.
Yeah.
They go, because when that one season I pitched in the men's team, I had nothing, and all I could do was throw a knuckleball, and it wasn't a very good one. Position players.
The fact that it was a knuckleball was enough to get people.
Yeah, I was so dumb. I threw it off the knuckles. You're supposed to throw it off the fingertips. Position players also have allowed 111 home runs off of 2,660 swings since 2008. A home run every 4.1% of swings. Meanwhile, real pitchers have allowed a home run on 1.6% of swings. Okay, that's triple.
Meatballs.
Yeah. So, we can't expect these guys to be good. And if you ever showed any aptitude at pitching, they probably would say you'd be better off trying to be a hitter. Hitters transition to pitchers more
than pitchers transition to hitters.
Correct. Now we do have a couple of good examples.
DeGrom.
No. I'm
talking about shortstop.
How about a guy? See if you can remember this. You watched him play in person. He pitched, and he came up as a pitcher, had a very good rookie year. Very good. Didn't take you very long, right? So he had that horrible playoff game against the Mets where he couldn't
throw a strike.
I thought
that was against the Braves, not the Mets.
Was that against the Braves?
I thought it was against the Braves.
He pitched against the Mets and got beat in a playoff game.
Right. No, then he became an actual pretty good outfielder at that point.
Major league outfielder. That's just impressive.
And one that was played multiple seasons.
Yes,
I remember Micah Owings tried to do the same thing. He became a hitter after he was initially a pitcher, but I don't think he could have hacked the fielding. And he wasn't as good a hitter.
Right. The Braves had a player back in their runs in the 90s named Mark Lemke, who played infield for them, and he retired and then went to the minor leagues and started fooling around with a knuckleball and was trying to get back to the major leagues as a knuckleball pitcher. I don't think we ever saw him pitch in a major league game, so it didn't work out. It's
unlikely, because the number of guys that would possess the talent to do both at a major league level is so small to begin with, that it's unlikely that you'd have some guy that had undiscovered pitching talent or hitting talent that's in the major leagues. They would know, oh man, this guy can actually kind of hit.
We should have put him out there years ago.
Exactly. I'm sure the San Francisco Giants are I'm sure if we taught Madison how to play outfield and gave him every day at bats, he might actually turn out to be a a slightly above replacement level major league outfielder. Or we could keep him as a pitcher where he's like a Cy Young candidate.
Or maybe not, you know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, the problem is that if you're good, the only reason you're switching is because you're not good at whatever you were originally doing.
So in the minor leagues, Kenley Jansen, the Dodger closer, was a catcher.
Yeah.
And you've actually watched him throw. He doesn't have full extension all that, because if you learn to throw as a catcher, you kind of bring it to your ear and throw from there. But he's just got such an incredible arm, and he went on the mound because he couldn't hit very well as a catcher.
Yeah,
and they said,
exactly.
maybe you should go on the hill.
They're like, well, you know,
that worked out.
You've got a great arm. We don't want to waste that. What happens if we put you on there? It worked out. And then I'm sure there are a legion of minor league guys that they tried that on, didn't work out, and then they were just gone.
So what you have to think about, fans, is watch the pitchers hit. Enjoy the weird things that happened this year, because it's probably never going to happen again. I don't see any way the DH isn't in both leagues next season.
I tend to agree with you on that, just because we don't... The nostalgia and tradition is why we keep the pitchers hitting. And it's too easy a bargaining chip for the owners to give up for them to keep it. Nobody's going to the ballpark to watch the pitchers hit.
And there's no expectation of success on their part. So if you ask a pitcher, you know, they ask Zach Eflin of you know, oh yeah, what would you like to do? I say, I'd like to bat 320, hit 30 homers, and drive in 120. He's a pitcher. Obviously, it's not going to happen. Give me a bat. I want to try. Because that's what they are. They're professional athletes. They're great athletes. Sure, they want to give it a hack.
Yeah, they're going to tell themselves, oh, yeah, if I just could get regular at-bats, I could be a hitter too. Because, yeah, you're going to do that when you're a hyper-competitive professional athlete. Like, there's no guy going, I mean, maybe Bartolo, but that's different when you're, you know, ancient.
And you could never put a clause and say, okay, if you hit 200 this season as a pitcher, we're going to give you, you know,
right.
This,
because
that,
even if you
thing.
did give them even if he did hit 200, I have a DH that's going to hit 250 and drive the ball a hell of a lot more.
So I hope you know you everyone enjoys it, because it's going to be gone for good, I think, after this season.
Thanks for listening. Subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform.
And you can follow us on Twitter at Almost Cool.
The hood.